Hello, welcome to this session on guidance for making an application to the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Inclusion Fund, otherwise known as the SENDIF. All the information is available on the Education website and can either be accessed through the Early Years Foundation Stage tab or the Early Years PBIs tab. I'm going to go through the Early Years Foundation Stage tab today and then into the SEND Inclusion Fund for Youth Children. As you can see, all the information that you can need is here. That includes applying for funding, steps for making an application, a guide to the types and levels of need, the SENDIF process map, panel dates, frequently asked questions, and an example of a Tier 2 application form. All information is available to download, including guidance, application forms, and contact details. We have put together some guidance for making an application form for you on this presentation, and all this information will be available to download alongside this recording. So the criteria and the guidance. So there are two tiers of funding towards the cost of support for children, Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the criteria will guide you to what level of funding the child in your setting is entitled to. So please read this before embarking on making an application. The guidance in the examples will help you in completing these forms correctly, and all the information, as said, is available on our education website. Please ensure that you are using the correct form for the level of funding that you're applying for, whether that is Tier 1 or Tier 2, to avoid any confusion around what level you are requesting. And each of those application forms is available to download separately to make this easier for you to do. Please ensure that every box is filled in with the correct information. We've done a lot of work around streamlining these forms for you and to ensure as well that we only ask for information that we need in terms of making a quick funding decision. So any missing or incorrect information slows the process of application. And the quality of the information is much more important than the quantity of the information, so please bear this in mind. Please ensure that you have completed a clear cycle of plan, do, review, and we would like to know what the impact of this has been, and if strategies have not worked, what adjustments and amendments you have made to make sure that the needs are being met of these children. And please ensure that you include any progress that the child has made in the application, no matter how small those steps may be, because they are important in giving us a real impression of the needs of that child. And any progress that you identify does not count against you in agreeing this funding. It merely gives us an understanding of the needs of their child and how quickly they may be developed. Please be specific in your assessments and clear about this. So, for example, if a child is on track developmentally, for the physical development, for example, then you need to ask yourself the question whether they are significantly behind if this is on track. So it is a best fit judgment that you need to make some really good decisions about whether that child is significantly behind if some areas is on track. And ensure that any assessment information that you include is consistent and in line with the development overview that is at the end of the forms. We often find that these do not match, and that raises questions for us at panel about the accuracy of that information. And please make sure that you include everybody who has some knowledge of that child in that application. They should all be contributing to filling that application form in, and keep those lines of communication clear, because again, that gives us a really good impression of how much you know the child and their level of development. Please ensure that any information is current. So what the development and the needs of the child are now. You may have had information from previous professionals, and that might be a little out of date, but we also need to understand how that child is performing, is achieving, is accessing the learning now, because that gives us again a good indication of what their real needs are. And be specific about how you are aiming to use this funding to support that child, how it will be used to support the needs of that individual child, not just generally, But again, that helps us in understanding how that funding will be used appropriately. If you have outside agencies involved with that child and family, then please include these on the funding request form, because again, it helps us to understand what steps you have taken to support that child, and include any of the recommendations made by these agencies and how you have implemented these and what the impact of these interventions has been on that child's progress. And for a tier 2, please include a report from a key agency, and this is useful as evidence of need, although there are other bits of evidence that you may wish to include, such as risk assessments or things like that, but an additional information is really helpful, and that is required in the tier 2 application. Please make sure that the funding request form is signed by parents or carers, as their consent is required before the application can be assessed. And if this is missing, then that will slow down that funding request. And as well, if the child is eligible for 30 hours, please make sure that the code is included in the application. Otherwise, we will have to chase you for this, and we won't, that will slow down that funding decision again. If the child is not accessing their full entitlement of hours, please make sure that you provide a context and a rationale for the reduced hours on offer. We don't recommend reduced hours for children, although we understand that this is sometimes needed in transition and help children settle, but we do need to understand the reasons that you have put this into place, as well as a realistic timeline for increasing their attendance to their full entitlement. And this should be done in collaboration with the parents. The parents should be in agreement around that reduced offer. And an increase in hours should not be dependent on receiving funding for a one-to-one, for example. That is not something that we are looking for. You should be working towards increasing hours regardless of receiving that funding. Most children with SEND do not need specialist resources or enhanced staffing to be successfully included, so please bear this in mind. And whilst the safety of children is paramount for most children with SEND, targeted intervention by an adult has more positive impact on progress than the constant presence of an adult. And we want to see this reflected in your application forms, how you are using that adult intervention in a targeted way. You may need to increase the intensity of support by adults through intervention, for example, but this does not mean that that child always needs one-to-one input. So please bear this in mind again. And if enhanced staffing is needed, please be specific about the reasons for this and the key times that this is required. So for example, around a lunchtime or transition times when that might be particularly challenging for that child and they will need extra help to do. If you are making an application for more than one child in your setting, then please proofread and moderate the funding request forms before sending. Proofreading is good anyway, even if you're only making one application, certainly if you're making more than one, because we often find quite inconsistent forms from settings, and that really does raise questions for us around how that they're being filled in and the accuracy of that information. So please moderate those before sending it. And if you are applying for more than one child, please be careful when copying and pasting between documents. We know you do this to save time, and we can understand this, but sometimes we find that the child's name is wrong or the information is wrong on the request forms, and this again raises questions for us about accuracy and will slow down that application to the fund. So the audience that are reading these applications, to give you an understanding, is a range of professionals, and the early years team and the quality improvement team reads each of the cases. So in the case of the early years team, that's the school cases, and the quality improvement team, that's the PBI cases, and then we present these to the panel. So if you have any questions, then please do ask the team, because we're more than happy to help and give you some pointers in terms of making application forms, making applications. But if applications are clear, consistent, and follow the guidance and include all the information requested, then they are much quicker and easier for us to present and to agree, because we have all that information at our fingertips and we have a really good idea of what that child's needs are. And those recommendations for us to the panel are much easier to make. We always aim to improve and streamline this process of applying for funding for you. We understand that time is precious and you have lots to do. We want to make this as easy as it can be. So if you have any comments or suggestions about how we can improve this, then please do let us know. You can email us at learningandachievement@sendif.gov.uk, and we will do our best to respond where possible with those improvements. It may not always be possible, but we do listen and we do try and help that so that you can spend less time doing these applications than they are. It's much easier for you to manage that workload. I'm now going to take you back to the education website and into the Earliest Foundation Stage tab and the Send Inclusion Fund Earliest tab, and then show you the example of a Tier 2 application form. And this has been put there for you as guidance in how to make those application forms work best. So I'm going to download the information from here. And here we go. This is the example of a completed Tier 2 application form. So section 1 is essential information. As you can see, all the information has been completed in this form with the child's name, date of birth, how old they are, and the nursery and setting that they are attending, which is important for us. Where information isn't available or you haven't got that yet, so for example, in this case, the child doesn't have a diagnosis yet, then that information, that box is still being filled in. So that lets us know that information isn't just missing. That just tells us that actually that isn't appropriate yet or it's not applicable yet. So please do fill this in because this does help us in making making a judgment about this application. One of the key bits of information, including dates of admission, names, the date of birth of the child, how old they are, is the number of eligible hours, as well as the actual number of. You must tell us this because this is really important. And as I said before, any reduced timetables must come with a narrative around why that is the case and a appropriate timeline for increasing that to the child's full entitlement. Other bits of important information are the nature of the child's SEN, as well as the assessment information. And this is just a quick overview for us when we are reading these application forms, because we read an awful lot of them, about where this child may be and how delayed they may be. And please make sure that this information matches any information that you put throughout the application form, and particularly in the development overview, as any inconsistencies do raise questions for us around accuracy. Moving on to section 2, we mentioned about other agencies that are involved. So if there are, then please include that information. That helps us to triangulate that and understand what the needs of the child are. And this then leads to any recommendations that they may be making and how you're putting those into place. Section 3 is the parental consent form. Again, applications cannot be accepted without parental consent. And in this case, obviously, that has been completed with the parent's signature, so we know that that's all fine. This parent or this child is not eligible for the 30 hours code, so there isn't one here. But in the case of those children that are, then that must be included so that we can double check that and make sure that that child is eligible for that funding, because we will fund for 30 hours. Section 5, then moving on, and this is about what strengths and needs the child has. And this is very important information for us, so please ensure that this is completed to the best of your ability. We have included here lots of information about the strengths and needs of the child, but done that in bullet points because sometimes this is much easier than writing a narrative, and it's easier for us to read and access because, again, we read lots of these cases, but it just gives a clear indication of what the child is able to do and also what the needs of the child are. This is very important because it does show their level of development and whether that matches with their particular age and what we expect for a child of that age, as well as the difficulties and needs they may have in the setting. That's very important for us to know as well. We also need to know what you have put in place to help that child so far. That's very important. So what you have put in place so far is very important. That can include any of those referrals, any work done with parents, and the case of this application form, any referrals that have been made, inclusion in particular groups or training that any staff members have been undertaking. And this is clear part of the plan, do, and review process. So this must be included in the application form. And then also the impact of those actions that are taken to help that child. As I said before, any impact or any progress that the child has made doesn't count against you, but it's really useful for us to know if those interventions are having an impact, if they are making a difference for that child, because if not, then we can possibly offer some advice or guidance, but it also helps us to understand how that child is progressing. For the tier 2, it's important to let us know why you believe the needs of the child require a higher level of funding. And in the case of this child, it is to help them keep safe in an environment, for example, that can be more complicated with younger children. And this child has no awareness of danger, so is needed to ensure that our child is kept safe, and to support targeted intervention groups or creating sustaining positive interactions with peers. An adult is needed for a little extra time to help that child interact and make progress in that way. So we need to understand why that level of funding would be necessary to help that child make progress. And here again is how that is going to help you do that, and what it's going to help you do that and put into place to help that child move forward. It's also important to talk to us about the monitoring and reviewing of that provision so that we understand how you're going to do that to make sure that things are working, and how that works within your setting. So for example, here, the leader will meet the key person and mum on a regular basis. That indicates to us that that plan, do, review cycle is in place and is effective. With the tier 2 application forms, we also require additional piece of evidence. So the development overshoot must be included as requested, and also one additional piece of information. We only require one. This could be a report from an outside professional, as we mentioned previously. And in the case of this application form, it is an ongoing risk assessment that shows that this child does need support to help keep safe. So that's a good indication of that level and why tier 2 might be requested, so that adult support will be put in place to help that child keep safe. And moving towards the end of the form is the development overview sheet. This again is important for us because it gives us an indication of where that child may have started with their baseline and where they are now, that development they've made, any impact of those interventions that you've put in place. And it really just gives us a quick overview of that progress the child has made. If you need any further guidance on completing this, then you can follow the link at the top of the application form, and that will give you some further information about how to complete this development overview sheet to help us in making those funding decisions quickly. I've taken you back now to the education website and the SEND Inclusion Fund for Early Years Children information. Should you have any further questions about the process for applying for funding, we have a frequently asked questions section on the site that is quite comprehensive in the questions that you may have if we haven't included this in the guidance or we haven't included it in this session today. So any questions may be answered there, but if you still have further information that you require, then please contact the relevant team and we'll be more than happy to help you in answering those questions and ensuring that you can make a successful application to the SEND Inclusion Fund. Hope you've found this session useful today. Any information that you require further, please just email us at learningandachievement@southwark.gov.uk and we'll be happy to help. Thank you.